All right. Does this work? All right. Welcome to the ME 903 seminar, this last seminar of the year. We've been very privileged this year to have the Alumni Seminar Series in recognition of the 150th anniversary. And we saved the, I don't know, maybe the best for last. So Fred Kiekhaefer. So Fred's background, he actually got his bachelor's degree in physics from Ripon College. Then, actually, he was telling me a story last night. So he applied to come here into mechanical engineering. They at first did not admit him. And John Bollinger, our friend, actually stepped in and said, he's perfectly qualified. And by the way, he's done all sorts of machining and engineering type work to go with his physics degree. So thankfully, John stepped in, got him in. So he ended up doing his master's degree in mechanical engineering here, and then did an MBA at Northwestern later on, and was telling me how valuable that was to supplement because of the leadership roles that he ended up taking on later on. So he founded Mercury Racing, and I think that's what he's going to be talking about today. But he told me one interesting story last night that I know a lot of our graduate students handle accommodations different ways, but his way of handling accommodations, he knew he had to work really hard in the engineering research building, so he ended up buying a motorhome and just parking it out back behind ERB so he could go between his experiments and his bed and his dining. And as long as he had enough water in there, everything worked out because I didn't have the camper hookups or anything. He was grumbling about that a little bit, but he said he was like 15 feet away from the door to ERB. But I'm not sure you could. I'm not sure you'd have a few tickets at this point trying to do that again. So with that, Fred, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, it was a little bit looser back then, so I got away with that. And the part of the story I was going to tell a little later, but I'll tell it now since he started off. It was a really nice little motorhome, and I didn't buy it actually. It was part of my work assignment when I worked for my father, and I was developing the operating profile of a motorhome chassis so that we could decide whether we were going to enter that business. So part of my job was take this damn thing wherever you got to go. So it was my get-around vehicle, especially since I was working in Fond du Lac and commuting to Madison to finish up my last project with John Bollinger, who was my professor of independent study and noise control. So I'd drive the motorhome down here, park in the parking lot. I had orals. They were coming up real quick, and I thought, damn, I gotta be presentable for orals. So I got in the back of that motorhome, and I got myself all showered and soaped up and ran out of water. Head to toe in soap suds. So I thought, what am I gonna do? Well, I had a dynamometer downstairs in the ERB, so I put some clothes on and I ran in and went down into my dyno cell and broke the water cooler off the pressure transducer and took an ice shower. Got all the soap suds off, put on some fresh clothes, and ran back up to do my oral exam. So nothing like starting with a little bit of pressure, but every career is a journey, and every one of these life-filling opportunities creates a certain amount of joy and trepidation as you march forward. So I pointed out here in my first slide, every career is a journey. And I'm going to describe two journeys, a little bit of my father's background and a little bit of mine. And the details of the background really isn't all that important, but it'll illustrate what is important. And success may not be what you think it is or what we're taught to believe it is. And I'll explain that in great detail as I go through here. My parents on both sides were farmers. My dad had a passion for the machinery, but he didn't like farming. He thought smelling like manure was not going to get him a wife. So Double E was his way out. He went to the Milwaukee School of Engineering, didn't finish. His grades were kind of poor. I stumbled, after he was gone from life, I stumbled across his report cards. He was not a great student. And so he quit a couple of jobs because he was also very bullheaded. He quit those jobs or he was fired. In fact, Ole Evinrude one time said the biggest human resources mistake he ever did was firing Carl Kiekhaefer from employment at Evinrude because, of course, he went on to become a very worthy competitor, proving that imperfect can still succeed, but it just takes tenacity and creativity. And he saw opportunity because he came off the farm. In electrical engineering, he was looking at devising magnetic separators that would pull barbed wire out of cow feed so the cows wouldn't get sick. So that's what he was going to go do. And my grandfather mortgaged the farm to enable my father to buy a factory. And to raise working capital, my dad fixed some inventory that was sold to Montgomery Ward, which was the big box store of that era. And he fixed this inventory for cash. He planned to make separators, but that never happened because he was redirected because Montgomery Ward wanted more of these Thor engines that my father had fixed. When he fixed them, they ran great. And he was in the outboard business. He wasn't in the magnetic clutch business. 3 years later, World War II hit. 3 years, that number is really short when you think about growing a business. He was set back because there was no aluminum allowed for anything but the war effort. He found opportunities by looking for what the war needed. And since he had engine experience from the Thor, which wasn't much of an engine, he developed chainsaw engines, pump engines, and target drone engines. And target drones were used for gunnery practice for our sailors going off the war. They would shoot the guns, try to blow these things out of the sky. And he said, it's the only product I ever had, never had a warranty claim. Because if it fell out of the sky, the gunner took credit. If they blew it out of the sky, the gunner took credit. Never was any feedback there that was negative. And so the aero part of Kiekhaefer Aeromarine Motors, Aeromarine was born. And I still have about 20 cases of these propellers because that was part of what I got out of his legacy when he left. And then after World War II, the recreational market exploded and he went back into the engine business, and Kiekhaefer Mercury Outboards was born at that time. And this little engine is proud 1947 Mercury Lightning. That was the year I was born. I always say my dad launched 2 rockets in that year, the Lightning and Fred. So in your careers, seek opportunity, and it'll present itself sometimes in weird ways. You'll face difficulty and you'll face setbacks, because everyone does. I don't know a single person in my life, at least at my age, whose first pick became their lifelong career. Usually it's a stumble and a trip, and you pick yourself up, you stay positive, you stay tenacious, and you work through the challenges while you seek something that you're really passionate about, because passion is a driver. Be open to redirection, because every plan fails, or as Mike Tyson likes to put it, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And the reality is, life will punch you in the face. Number 1 success, my first one. I was a lucky kid. I was born in the United States of America. From a sperm my father emitted to an egg that was recipient, and I was born in this wonderful place. And it's only about 4% of the world's population that's as lucky as we are. That's the very first gift, because almost anywhere else you go in the world, you're not that lucky. And look, I even had hair. And then NASCAR in the 50s, my dad had a real fun time for him. He learned that NASCAR burns gas and money. He burned up most of his wealth racing cars. He always said it was to get an education in 4 cycles so we could do the Mercruiser. That's bullshit. He just had fun doing it, and he was very creative, and he took 2 consecutive NASCAR championships in the early 50s. He won so many that the bets were who would finish second behind his car. He was the first to bring billboards into the cars. He was the first to bring them in closed carriers. And he really set a lot of standards. They had rules on how big the fuel tank could be. They didn't have any regulation about how long and big the filler could be. So he had 6-inch diameter tubes. He got an extra 10 gallons out of his track cars. And because he couldn't see the tires and the tire wear, he cut holes in the fender well so the driver could look and see the tire wear. Just lots of little things that he did that made it a success. But in the process, I think he burned up most of his wealth. And that led him to have to sell the company. He said, I can go public or I can sell to somebody who's already public, and I don't want to deal with the street. So he sold his company to Brunswick and then struggled for the rest of his time there having a boss. He was the boss. He did not take orders very well. So he struggled there. Meanwhile, I got moved to Florida when I was 10 years old. developed my passion for boating down there. I did a lot of water skiing. We had a little sport we called grapefruit tag, because a lot of the shorelines were covered with orange groves and grapefruit groves. So we'd go up and we'd steal grapefruit out of the orange and grapefruit groves, and we'd go in our boats and we'd try to smash one another with grapefruit. So closing speeds of about 50 miles an hour. I broke more windshields on boats than I can remember. But it was a lot of fun and gave us opportunity to develop some skills. I got a chance to go to drive-in movies before I was old enough to drive a car, because there was a drive-in theater on the lake in the Chains in Winter Haven, Florida, so I just drive to the movies, get out of the boat, go up, turn up all the speakers in the back row, light a couple of mosquito wicks, and kiss the girl sitting next to me. It was a great time. And then in the summers, I got a job as a teenager testing engines at our test site. My father had found this lake in Florida, Lake Conlin, which he named Lake X so nobody would know where it was. And I learned to rig boats there. I learned to race boats there. And I also learned not to race boats there, because I got beat up on my second boat race pretty hard, crossing the Gulf Stream in nasty big seas. Bloody nose and a couple of bruised ribs, and I decided I wanted to be on the pencil end business from that forward. And I then moved into dirt bikes. I raced and rode and broke and fixed dirt bikes, because every time I tried to do something with an outboard, the technicians would go occasionally, because the boss's kid did something wrong with his engine, so they'd take it away from me and go see what was wrong, which was usually nothing. So I got my education fixing my bikes. I acquired the mechanical skills, and I had a really good teacher in high school that inspired me with physics. And so I thought, oh, physics, that's good. It was all preparation, but I wasn't aware at the time that it was preparation, but it was kind of filling my head with the basics of science and engineering, and I have mechanical skills from rigging race boats. My dad would never let me race the damn things. As soon as I put a boat together all rigged up for a particular class, he would give that to one of his dealers, and he'd go and win the damn race with my boat. So that got me so mad, I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. So he said, oh, let's do that. I rigged the boat. No, go over it. I said, no, I'm not going to race. You losing interest? Yeah, I really don't want. That was when I started racing, after I refused to go racing. A little reverse psychology. All preparation for those coming, but I wasn't aware at the time. So then it was time for college. I went to Ripon. Ripon was a great little school. I was not ready to come to a place like UW, because I was, quite frankly, unprepared for academics. And I was very, very worried that I would come here and get neglected and flunk out, because I wasn't very good. Florida school system sucked back then. So Ripon gave me a really good chance. I signed up with a mentor there who was a physics senior student, and he really got my brain to function like it was supposed to. He got me to think logically instead of chaotically, the way I was raised in the Florida school system. So he really got me ready. I had many, many teachers in a liberal arts college. All of them were bosses in whatever course they were teaching, and so I got a lot of diversity. I looked at them as preparation and a crash course in differing expectations. Because I had a course in composition, and I discovered that my writing style was not adequate, and I got a very bad grade in that course. So I had to take it again. I took it again, and I got a perfect grade in that course. The only thing that changed was the teacher. One guy liked prose, and the other guy liked business writing, very succinct and to the point. I was good at the latter, not at the former. But it was preparation, and I learned a lot. And then I had a summer internship, because my dad was still president of Mercury. They were developing the snowmobile at that time, and it is the one in the picture. So that was my first engine. I developed the snowmobile engine. The only downside is I was mandated to use as many outboard parts as I could. So it was a compromise from day one, and it is now known in the circles that collect these things as the lead sled. It was heavy, and it tipped over, and that's you. And you know your environment where you're going to operate, you test and develop in that environment, not 2 inches of snow on top of a cornfield. Because it got too heavy. It was very reliable, but it had to be, because it took a long time to get it out of the ditch. But I learned it was a lot more fun than physics. So that's when I decided I was going to come here in engineering grad school. So I came here, and I also worked for my dad. He had quit Brunswick and restarted Aeromarine, but in his work, he had a non-compete in everything related to marine, so the one place he didn't was snowmobiles, because those didn't exist when he sold his company, so that's what he did. I come down here, they took a chance, they let me in after arguing a little bit with Bollinger's help, because they said, oh, he doesn't have the undergraduate requirements to come here. He's only taken these few engineering courses. Well, my senior year at Ripon College was courses here in beginning engineering. And I got physics credit at Ripon, so I was a Ripon graduate, which they would have taken without a question, except I didn't have the engineering undergraduate requirements behind me. But anyway, he went to work for me, and they finally let me in with a little bit of argument. And I worked hard, and I was prepared. At this point, I had learned enough about engineering that when my dad quit and restarted KAM, I joined him and was developing snowmobile engines. And our big customer, all those engines in the background there were Bolin's snowmobile engines. And that was our manufacturing and engineering team at the time. Then the infamous motorhome, it was part of my job to assess that. So this was my final residence in my last year at UW. But I told you that story already. But there's the actual vehicle that I brought down here. It was nice until it ran out of water. My second engine was also a snowmobile engine. This was a free-air 3-cylinder, developed 120 horsepower out of 800 cc's in 1972, which was pretty big numbers for that time. My third engine was a liquid-cooled inverted V-twin, and that was a really neat little engine. That thing would sit there in the dyno at $5,000. You could balance a quarter on the crankcase. It was so smooth because all the engineering reasons it was smooth. And it was only 1.25 inches or so between the rods because we had a special way of sealing the crankcase with an offset ring. Beautiful little engine. Tried like hell to make that thing work. Then Bolin's quit, and we never found a customer. That was a major setback. Almost sold it to Bombardier, but that fell apart too because Jimmy Carter managed to screw up our economy. So I did race engine again. I worked on this little guy. That's me, still with hair. That was an offshore powerboat racing engine. I primarily did the inlet manifold and fuel management of that engine, and it was quite successful. We took, I think, 4 U.S. championships and 3 global championships in offshore powerboat racing with our customers. That was a good deal. But I discovered through that negotiation with Bombardier that I had a big hole in my knowledge base. I needed business skills, not just engineering skills. So I went to Northwestern, and they weren't going to let me in either, even though my grades got a lot better here than they were when I came out of high school. But they weren't going to let me in either until I plastered my face against the glass window of the admission advisor there, and they said, you might as well get tired of looking at that because you're going to see it every day till you let me in. So he caved. Then my dad required heart surgery. I was partway through business school, and he asked me to come back and run Aero Marine. He made me VP and general manager, and he made some additional promises. So I looked at it as an opportunity. I ran the business by day. I finished my MBA at night, and the business became focused and profitable. Then my dad recovered, and I followed through on the promise and was making an effort to acquire KAM from him. He was not quite my age at that time, but he was getting up there, and I thought it was time, and he clearly did not. He recovered, and he forgot his promises, and trust between us evaporated, which was kind of a sad state, but in 1978, I resigned, a setback for me, and a decision to move on. And I guess the lesson there was you always need to be true to yourself. And it doesn't matter who the person is on the other side. If you're asked to do something that violates your trust or your ethics, move on. Don't accept it. I had doubts, though, because I had always worked either for my dad or had been in school, and was I competent or was I just the boss's kid and lucky? Everybody has doubts. It's normal. It just doesn't feel good. It's not okay. I had met a guy on an airplane that ran a medical diagnostic equipment manufacturer called Fisher Imaging. And he invited me to come down and interview with him, and I did. And he offered me a job, and I became manufacturing manager for new products for Fisher. That was what today we would call pilot run of a newly engineered product. And so I learned good manufacturing processes, which were required for anything that's medical. I learned material management because materials manager quit, so I got another job. Turns out I was competent, and every time somebody quit, I got another responsibility. And before long, I was really loaded with incoming inspection, quality materials management, ordering product, pilot production. And as soon as I was finished with pilot production and everything was up and routine and good, I handed it to the production manager, who was another MBA about my age, University of Chicago, if I remember right. Then they made a mistake. They hired my new boss. Ray was a setback. He was a crusty old bastard. And there's no joy in working for a COB. So 2 years in, I resigned. And once again, wandering around, what am I going to do now? I felt rudderless. I was wondering, and then I read a book called What Color's Your Parachute? It's been around forever. It's really an old book, but it's very good. Bowles nailed it. He said, find the stuff that makes you happy, and then find other things that are opportunities that employ the things that make you happy. And I read that book, and it led me to think about something I never would have thought about, which was management consulting. Because I thought, well, turns out I have an ego. My ego said, hey, you know, it's good if you got an ego to have people praise you for your knowledge and your capabilities. And consulting does that in a heartbeat because you're the expert that comes in. So I loved it. I got into that. It was another redirect in a complete different direction from where I had been. And I was accepted at Price Waterhouse, but not right away. Education and experience wasn't enough to get the job. I got a rejection letter from them, but I'll prove you networks matter. The other guy who was the manufacturing manager that quit when I did from Fisher Imaging, he got hired by Price Waterhouse in Chicago, and the partner said, who do you know we ought to get? And he says, you ought to hire Fred. So the partner in Chicago called the partner in Boston and said, you ought to hire Fred. Oh shit, we just sent him a rejection letter. So I got invited back in through my buddy Rich and his reference, and I got accepted at PW, and I joined them in their consulting. The beautiful part about PW, they had a culture of continuing education and advancement. It was full of brilliant mentors. I mean, all of the people were smart. All of the people were very knowledgeable. They had area experts that could pull you along in an area you weren't as good. And it was just amazing. I had rapid growth personally. I always say it was even better than UW as a graduate student because they literally took you under the wing and made you better than you ever thought you could be. I grew a lot. And they had global clients, which also gave me tremendous opportunities. One of my other friends who quit working for my dad went to work for BMW in their marine program. And he talked to them and said, you know what? If you're going to make this business work, you ought to have a conversation with Fred. So I visited Munich. I was there myself against 7 of their management board, and they asked me what it would take to run the business. So I had a little conversation. I went away, I asked for about an hour to think about it and prepare, so I had to put a presentation together. And I said, you're going to spend 3 years losing money. You're going to run out of patience, and you're going to quit. That's what I think is your business model, unless you're willing to endure 3 years of losses, spend this amount of money, I don't remember the amount now, but spend this amount of money on tooling and marketing because you're going to go up against Mercruiser and Volvo who are established in the marketplace. And if you're not willing to do that, don't start. They went off, they caucused, they came back and said, that's the best presentation we've ever had. Incredibly honest, you're right, we're not going to start. So I talked myself out of a good job running a BMW Marine. But I was at the time I was over there, I was working on a project for the partner in Paris, and he got transferred to Chicago, and he recruited me to come to Chicago. And I was loving consulting. I was having a great time. I thought that was my calling. And then my dad died. And one of his board members called and said, if you still want this business, move fast. So I did. I had an opportunity to buy the assets from his estate. I got saddled with a couple of minority shareholders because they were the ones that were supposed to get the business, according to a letter my father had written, but it wasn't in his will, so I was able to weasel my way in there. Local bank gave me credit, and I acquired the assets. It was a perfect fit, except it was losing money big time. It fit my engineering passion, it fit in my boating experience, it worked well with my manufacturing background and management expertise, and it had a pretty much capable staff. They were just poorly led. and they were burning a lot of cash. So I had an issue to deal with right away. So I had an all-hands meeting. I love this picture. I just come out of the consulting world. I'm still wearing a suit and tie, and my dad's still looking over my shoulder. And then I realized, hey, I'm in the recreational business now. I don't have to dress like a monkey. I can dress like I'm a boater. So I started wearing polos, and I never went back. But I had a survival plea. I brought everybody in the company, from the janitor to the chief engineer to the secretaries, administrative staff, everybody. I said, I got to have some help. I figure I got 60 days before I run out of available cash. I need help. What are we doing that's stupid that we should stop? What are we doing that we should do more of where we're making money? And come back to me with your ideas. And they did. We cut some products, we expanded others, we focused the business on what made money, and we were profitable in the 6 months. And the bank bridged the difference between what I thought I had in 60 days and 6 months. So we got through it. Then I joined both the executive committee and Young Presidents Organization, both of which gave me an opportunity to learn from my peers that were young and presidents of companies. And it provided more mentors for me. And mentors turned out to be one of the core values in growing. Then we had a big gamble. We were making parts for offshore racing to make the Mercury Racing drives stronger. And one of our customers said, why are you doing that? Why don't you make your own drive? And he had just sold his business to BMW. He made carbon fiber parts and things for some of their sports cars. And so he had money, he was flush, he wanted to go racing, but he didn't want to race something that was going to break. So we agreed that we would do a drive development for him to use in Europe. We would sell it everywhere else, and we would get paid on a progress payment with certain milestones. So our first milestone arrived, he was gone. Maybe in the base of the Mediterranean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether he was straight up or whether his money came from other sources of income, but he was gone and we couldn't find him. So I went to the bank, and the bank said, okay, we'll help you through this. But it changed the company for good and forever. In February of '88 at the Miami Boat Show, we had a private showing, private for invitation-only potential customers, because we knew who they were. They were already buying on our accessories and stuff. So we sent out personal invitations with a recommended time. They would come to the suite at the Marriott, and we would show them the product. We sold 9 months of what we could produce in 2 days. It was it was the total buzz of the Miami Boat Show, because we weren't in the show. We were near. We had a booth. We had our trinkets and toys and accessories, but we didn't have the drive on display. We had that at the Marriott. But we had a couple of good customers step in early, and this was the first race boat. This is the one Don Johnson piloted to the 1988 World Championships in Key West. Big growth, a lot of product, big loan debt, and personally guaranteed. And then we saw the market starting to soften, and we went, oh boy, gulp hard. Another redirect. My YPO mentor said, consider selling it. I had $5 million in personal debt, guaranteed. My minority shareholders wouldn't step up a bit, so they were not part of the equation. And I realized I could go bankrupt and the business was at risk, so I made a hard decision. And I accepted Mercury's flirtation and sold my company for the opportunity. And it was a timely decision because I was prepared for selling the business. There's a time in every owner's mind, ready or not, you're going to leave the business, either with your boots off because you sold it, or with your boots on because you died at your desk, but you're going to leave. And I was prepared. Mercury made me the president of the racing division. I retired all the bank debt, and I had become financially secure. The downside is racing wasn't secure. I had to change the culture there. It wasn't healthy, and I was like deja vu all over again. Here we are, another sick company that needs to be fixed, and we had corruption and kickbacks and all kinds of stuff under the table, and that had to stop. So we were on a cultural quest to turn the business culture. I had another mentor, a fellow by the name of Dr. Bowen White, and Bowen wrote this book, Why Normal Isn't Healthy. The guy's a nut job. He's a doctor, but he's really more of an organizational therapist. I met him because he presented to a tech meeting as Dr. Yurko, spelled Jerko on his shirt. Came in with a red nose and clown hair and big floppy shoes. Not the kind of guy you're going to present to a business organization unless you're in a social environment. But he was really a grounded individual with some great ideas on how to make a culture healthy, how to involve people, how to get them committed. And that was a time when I introduced the green flag. And anybody that knows anything about racing, the green flag in motorsports is give it. The course is clean, you're ready to go, drive as fast as you can within your capability of your equipment and your talent, and go out there and win. So I gave a little pin, like your 150th UW engineering pin, gave one to every employee. So when you come into work, be ready to give it your best. The flag is green, go at your limit, but don't wreck and don't crash the business. And if you need help, ask for it. And we had, it was a year of him coming in every other week or so and helping people through business choices, uncertainty. The guy had a gift. He was just amazing. And we did transform Mercury Racing into a healthy business. It cost a few people their jobs, the ones that couldn't get it or didn't want to fit. But we did have a culture change. We upgraded the weak staff, we hired stronger people, we improved the product quality, we expanded the product lines and sold more of those expanded product lines. And we went from big losses to the #1 earner in all of Brunswick's portfolio. #1 on sales in terms of earnings per dollar of sales of any company in there. So they kept giving me more. I ended up with the commercial and government side. I ended up with commercial boats for government. And the #2 company a year later was the commercial and government business, which was the #2 earner in Brunswick's portfolio behind Mercury Racing. So I did make some healthy changes there, and we did some great stuff. The hardest one, the automotive world was under incredible pressure to improve fuel economy. So cars were getting lighter, the engines were getting smaller, everybody was making things cleaner and neater and smaller and cleaner and neater and smaller, cleaner and neater and smaller, until you couldn't push a boat to the engines anymore. So I knew at some point in time the demand for power in a boat was going to cross over with the demand of power for an automobile. So I talked him into spending the money to develop this quad valve engine. Big fight. I must have presented 10 different ways to do this project. And they finally agreed to the one that was the smartest. So we did it in-house. We got 1350 horsepower with twin turbo on pump gas. And you put 2 of them in a boat, or 4 of them, depending on the boat. And it was genuinely a revolution in the performance boating industry. I had at least 2, maybe 3 companies where the presidents of the boat companies came to me and thanked me for saving their business because it gave their customer a reason to trade up. And we sold and we sold and we sold. And this engine was great. We did a racing version of it. It ran 1650 on race fuel. The guy that ran at the first race was the world's best throttleman, still is one of the best, Johnny Tomlinson, T&T Marine. One of the press guys said, well, what are you going to do after the first race before the second race to get ready? We'll put some gas in the boat, check the oil. That's a race motor. You're not going to take it out and rip it? No, that's running fine. He ran all 3 races, never took the engines out of the boat. Made a big difference in that world. Then at 65, I was retired. Notice that I was retired. I did not retire. I was retired. My legacy, I had competent teams in place. I had groomed my successor as any good manager does, and I had mentored him well. But I wasn't prepared for the dropping of the hammer because I was performing well. I was having fun. My employees made me a cool cocktail table. But I felt like it was a setback. I had to find a new purpose. And so I founded K-Lab Design Works. I moved to Colorado, purchased SolidWorks, had to relearn engineering because I'd been managing for 3 decades. And I designed this variable pitch surface drive, which I prototyped in 2018 and 2019. Whoop. And here is the CAD model of that variable pitch drive. I don't know if the sound is... Dry sump, drop box. There was my #1 prototype. Had a built-in oil circulation pump. And it wiggles the ears just like God intended. It's a pitch cup inside that slides back and forth with an actuator that pushes on that rod. I commissioned this test boat So I put a Cummins diesel engine in it, 550 horsepower, and cycle tested it. Had to hide it from a lot of people. Had some design issues that I had to change, but the market moved outboards. I got a call from that boat builder and said, you know, we did a lot of diesel boats, and that would have been a great solution to our diesel problem, but we haven't sold one in 2 years. Everything's going to outboards. And because it was cool doesn't mean it's saleable. So I had 9 years invested. I looked at it as sunk cost, and I said, you know, if this were me still running Mercury Racing, and my engineers brought me a project at this stage, and my marketing guy said, we're not selling anything but outboards, what would I do? I'd have killed the project. I said, what am I doing spending my own money when I'm not spending shareholder money? So I made the hard decision. It was a setback, but I killed the project. Reality took over. The decision was variable pitch surface drive is done. So I buried my prototypes. I converted my test boat to outboards. You got to know when to fold them, know when to hold them, as the old song went. And now I'm still searching for a new purpose. So K-Lab Design Words did something fitting for an old man. I designed an ergonomic hammock, which I have prototyped, and it works very well. My dog and I both like sleeping in it. Now the question is, do I take it forward, or do I just enjoy the prototypes? So they are really cool. I mean, you know, a hammock wants to fold you like a jackknife. This thing elevates your knees like it should, and it's very, very comfortable. Gives me a reason to use my CAD station, but I have to decide where to go with it. Takeaways from our journeys. You already have more experience than you think. You know more than you think. You just got to round it out and fill in the holes. And there are always holes. As I say many, many times, nobody's born knowing this shit. You got to learn it from somewhere. So fill the holes. Number 2, formal education is just the first step. Be a student for life. Think critically. Surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, because they'll lift you up. And stay curious. Find mentors and be a mentor to others. Do what you're passionate about, and you'll never work a day. It's going to be a little bit turbulent. You're going to stumble while you're searching. You might find some blind alleys. I certainly did. But that's part of the process. And if you don't find fulfillment, move on until you do. Wealth isn't money. And this is probably the single most important takeaway. Yeah, I did all right. I'm moderately successful, and I have enough wealth that I'm comfortable for the rest of my life, but it's not about money. It's health, it's relationships with people, it's personal integrity, and pursuing a purpose that's greater than yourself. Those are the things that really define wealth. And have fun. Don't engage with negative people any longer than you must. Time is fleeting, God knows that. Use your time wisely. That's, I think, the single biggest takeaway, is to recognize that wealth isn't money. But it doesn't hurt either. I mean, I started out before College of Engineering. I had this little Toyo Kogyo Cosmo Sport. That's fancy talk for, before I'm Mazda, I was Toyo Kogyo Cosmo Sport. I drove that little twin rotor wonkle around. It's just like a Mazda, just a cheap little car. But it was before I went to school, before I learned a lot of things. That was one of the jobs I did, was to test the rotary engine to see whether that had a place in the marine industry. And applying knowledge and experience to an opportunity, I ended up here long after College of Engineering. I ended up with this nice little 296 GTB Ferrari, among several other collectible and high-performance sports cars. So the message is, enjoy the fruits of your labor, but it's not this way, it's however you define them. I happen to like cars, so that's how I define my toys, and they're purely toys. One's an investment, the rest are toys. And life's top 5, commit to the endless pursuit of these 5. 1, maintain health and wellness, because age comes at you faster than you ever expect. I still feel like 14 inside, but I'm 78 on the outside. It comes at you fast, because it was just yesterday. I was chasing people around Lake Mendota in a kayak. Foster relationships, and this is one where I failed. I did not do the job I should have done, but find positive and smart people and stay in touch. Don't let the good ones get away. Too often you drift away. Out of all my classmates here at the UW, 2 of them I'm still close with. 3 of them I should still be close with, and probably a dozen of them I should at least stay in contact with. But the reality is, I got 1 from business school, I got 2 that I've stayed in touch with from UW, and none from Ribbon. You just lose track, and that's relationships are so damned important that is where I failed, and where I would encourage you to reach out and touch somebody you haven't talked to in a while. It's too important. And another hard and fast rule is never, ever compromise integrity. There is no such thing as a temporary integrity outage. You either choose to give it up or you choose to maintain it. I've known people who have given it up. One of them was my dad, and I'm not proud of that. And have fun. Life's too short to go around doing things that are boring. Even if your fun is defined as your work, which for me, for a lot of the time, it was. I had a great time doing what I did for a living. Make sure you're having fun. The other thing I'll say is I also enjoy snow skiing. That's part of the reason I moved to Colorado. I've enjoyed snow skiing since I was at Ripon College, and my fraternity brothers voted me the least likely to return for a second ski trip. I was so bad, but I have never missed a season in almost 60 years. It was fun. And find purpose beyond yourself, which is my current challenge. Careers top 5, become ever more competent. The degree is just a license to keep learning. Blow your own horn, because nobody will blow it for you, but you got to do it in a way that keeps you humble. You don't want to be braggadocious, but you also want to make sure people know what you've contributed. It's way, way too easy to be overlooked. So toot your horn. Seek and provide mentorship. Mentors have been so important to me through my career, through my life, on both the personal side and the business side. I can't say it strongly enough how important mentors are. My earliest one was my mom. She's the one that got me through my dad. My more recent ones were here at the university, making sure that you did your work, that even though you went off with no sleep, having turned in your last research paper, and you went to serve the military in Biloxi, Mississippi, and you were damn near asleep on the way down there because you'd been up all night. John Bollinger said, it's not your normal quality of work. You want to rewrite this thing? It was bad, but I was half asleep. My roommate's girlfriend was typing it as I was dictating it. And I turned it in because I had to be there. Not pretty. Network, 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 network. You never know when that door will open because somebody was your friend, like Rich Hoffman was for me at Price Waterhouse. So many others where a client opportunity came up that I didn't even know existed because somebody turned to me and said, he can do a good job with that. So networks pay dividends like unbelievable. And you're going to endure and mitigate setbacks. Setbacks are temporary. Do something you're passionate about, and if work is not fulfilling, move on, find something that is. You just don't have time for chicken manure or small people. And that's my words of wisdom. Thank you.
All right, anyone have questions?
Shoot anything you want at me, I'm open. Or ignore me, I'm closed too. Boy, I must have been thorough.
What's the investment car?
What's the investment car? Oh, I have a Porsche Carrera GT, 2004. I bought it used. It had 50 miles. The previous owner and I put on 25 of them. But I had been promised an allocation, and my dealer didn't get it. But he called me because this guy was a speculator. He brought one in from California. So I went up to see it, and he wanted to sell it and get out. I wanted to buy it and get in. So we went to DMV, did 2 transactions. He hadn't even registered the car yet. So I asked the gal behind the counter, "Are you on commission? Because I sure hope so. You made 40 grand today." But that's a good car. Yeah.
I really wish I had attended a seminar like this 15 years ago or even 30 years ago. I probably would be doing something special. But I just want to have a question. You mentioned that find a purpose beyond yourself. Could you elaborate that a little bit more?
we have many things we can do with our time, and our time on this planet is limited. I mean, you think about the odds of it just being alive on Earth, floating around in space, with all those other stars in the galaxy that may or not have people on them, and somebody chose to have a nice little romantic tryst, and you were the result of it. And you're here, and you're in the United States. I don't know if you're a naturalized citizen or it doesn't, you're here. Enjoy the fact that you're here, because it is such a set of lucky circumstances that we're walking this planet. So your give back is find some purpose. For me, it was providing enjoyment to people that loved boating, and boating was part of that experience. Let me make something where they can go out in their boat and come back, instead of go out in their boat and get towed back. You know, so my whole purpose around the marine side of things was find a way to make it fun. It's going to be expensive, but as long as you're delivering value, it doesn't matter what the price tag is. If you're delivering, I have people say, well, back when I was a competitor of Mercury, not a part of it, Mercury will give me those drives for racing. Yeah, and you can go out and break. Or you can spend 20 grand twice and go out and win. You may not win because there's already people that bought these, so it's your choice. You want to try to keep up or you want to break, your choice. They know what their product is worth. So I was delivering value even though it was expensive. When I was consulting, I was making businesses healthier so employment could grow, so people could have jobs and support their families. And now that I'm doing largely charity work, I do a lot of work with Wounded Warrior Project. I do work with Warriors Chariot, which is a small group in Colorado, with Aero Angels, which is an amazing group. They have private jet owners that provide their aircraft, pilots that donate their time, and we go out with our supercars and raise money to pay for ground landing fees and fuel. And they'll take seriously critically ill kids and fly them from wherever they are to whatever hospital they need to go for treatment. No charge to the families. And you want to feel good? Meet one of those families. And I'll do that all day long as much as I can. And I do other charity work with, Cars and Coffee, where the donations go to